covering the stories that impact your life, your town, your state, and your future. This is the Means Report with your host, Brad Means.
Hello, everybody, and welcome once again to the Means Report. We certainly appreciate you spending part of your day with us. We hope that you are safe and well in the wake of the storm. You know, in recent weeks on the Means Report, we've covered relief and recovery. We're going to continue that today, especially the recovery process when it comes to making you whole again. A lot of times we lean on our insurance companies to help us do that. But that claims process, man, it can be a bear, can it not? I know so many of you are going through it right now, and we have an attorney to help navigate that process, give you some information that'll equip you to be more informed when you deal with your agent. Also, helping Augusta businesses succeed. It is really one of the main goals of the Augusta Metro Chamber of Commerce. They have a brand new leader at the helm, and she will be with us as well. And of course, we'll wrap up the Means Report as we always do with ways that you can stay in touch and help us get more great guests like our first one. He's Chris Cosper. Chris is an attorney with Hull Barrett, a longtime prominent law firm here in town. His specialty is business and commercial litigation, and he's going to help us with those insurance questions. Chris, thanks for taking the time to be with me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
First of all, a super general question, and maybe it's too general, but it's just to ask you if this is an accurate perception of insurance. When I think of insurance, I think of something bad happened to me. I lost something, a home, a car, or it was damaged. And the insurance company comes in and pays me and fixes everything and gets me back to normal. Is that accurate?
I think that's a good aspiration for insurance, but maybe not necessarily the way it always works out. Mm-hmm. I think of insurance as a contract to provide you payment when you have a covered form of loss. And so a big concern there is whether or not your form of loss is covered, the actual loss to your property or vehicle, and then a second point is whether the actual damages you suffer are covered within the points of the policy.
All right, let me just go with the negative, first of all, the not covered part. A lot of people out there may be hearing no from their agent when they're like, wait a minute, I'm in a crisis, I need more yeses from you. What are some things that are not typically covered by homeowners insurance that people might think they are?
So some of the biggest surprises that I see for homeowners is, for example, after a hurricane, if you sustain flood damage, that may not be covered by a normal homeowner's policy unless you have a specific policy that covers flood. People also think, well, I have coverage for a hurricane, and so if hurricane rain blows in my house, that's covered. But the reality is most policies exclude something called wind-driven rain, which is basically water that enters in through your house through existing openings or defects. And so probably to have coverage here, you would have had to have external damage to your home that then allowed water to get in. So if you don't have missing shingles on your roof, they're probably not going to cover water that entered through your roof. That's one example.
It's a powerful example, and I'm guessing there are really specific ways to determine whether or not the rain was wind driven, and the adjusters have that, are equipped to diagnose that, right?
I don't know that they're equipped to diagnose it, but they're quick to point it out if they think it might be there.
Yeah.
So it may require some extra expertise to diagnose that. Fortunately or unfortunately here, most of the damage that I'm seeing around is from trees that actually caused an impact onto a home. And so that's likely not to be an issue unless you had water damage without a tree on your house or without any obvious damage that an adjuster can see.
All right, can we stick with trees for a minute? And I told you before we started this recording that we could spend the whole show on this, but let's talk about trees. What is covered and what is not? For instance, if a tree falls on my property and smashes my house, surely that's covered.
So that is likely covered. And so I guess the first question is a tree that falls on your house. As a homeowner, it's your job to remove that tree and mitigate your damage and patch the hole in your roof. So that's the first thing I would tell everybody. Your job is to mitigate your damage and make sure more rainwater doesn't get in.
At my expense?
At your expense, but that will probably be covered by the insurer.
Got it.
And the cost to remove that tree from your house should be covered as part of your standard coverage. Now, if your tree is on a different structure, that's going to depend on whether your policy has coverage for other structures, which is going to be a provision to look for in the specific policies, specifically if it's not connected to your house. If it's a separate structure, you're going to need to go look at your policy to see if that's covered.
What if it falls on my neighbor's home? Whose responsibility is that?
So typically, a tree that falls by an act of God is not the fault of either neighbor.
Which a hurricane is an act of God.
Most trees in this Hurricane Helene situation are going to be acts of God, and they're not going to be the fault of an insurer. And in that circumstance, wherever the tree comes to rest, it's that landowner's responsibility to deal with it. So if a tree falls from your property onto your neighbor's home, it's generally going to be your neighbor and his insurance company that have to deal with that tree.
And vice versa.
And vice versa.
Chris, when should we know when it's time to file a claim? I know we're dealing with overwhelming damage in our community right now, but still there might be the question, should I just pay for this so that I don't get dinged and get higher premiums in the future? How do you make that calculation?
Well, one easy calculation here, I would say, is if you have a tree on your house, you should probably make an insurance claim.
Yeah.
So I think it's that simple for most people. Where it becomes a question, I think, is if you have lesser forms of damage. Maybe you just have a fence that's damaged.
Yep.
And for me, the equation is to look at what is the deductible on my insurance policy and what is the cost to make the repairs. So for example, if my deductible is $5,000 and it costs $6,000 to repair my fence, I may not choose to file a claim for the reasons you're talking about. I'm concerned about the impact on my claims history or that sort of thing. But it's fair to say if it's probably double your deductible, that might be a reasonable claim to file.
You know, I talked to somebody the other day who said sometimes in natural disaster situations, it doesn't impact your rating, if you will, with the insurance company. So that's something to ask as well, because it's a natural disaster. My next question for you has to do with what you mentioned in your first answer about having somebody with expertise by your side. How do we know when the insurance person says, here's your check, go make yourself whole again? Chris, how do we know if that's the right amount and if that's something we should accept? Is that the point where maybe we should get an attorney?
So some people will do it without an attorney, and I think that's totally fine. Some people feel more qualified and capable to do that, and that's generally acceptable. I'll tell you this though, what I have seen is that an adjuster will show up at your house. They won't bring a ladder. They will walk into your house and they will look at the damage they see. And then they will write an estimate for that damage. And then it's up to you from there to hire someone to do work or to determine if there's more damage. That adjuster is probably not going to climb up into your attic to see what other problems exist. And so many homeowners will just take that first check and then they'll be done and they think that's it. Mm-hmm. But the reality may be much larger extent of damage. And so they may need to deal with that. And that may be through contractors, through an attorney. You can hire other forms of adjusters to help you. So definitely, if you have a significant claim, I would say it's unlikely that first check from the insurance company is going to cover all your damage.
And let's issue a word of caution, if we should, to our viewers. If you do accept that check, is the door closed? Is the deal with the insurance company over?
It could be, but it's not necessarily. I see a lot of insurers who are issuing an initial check, maybe for tree removal or something else, and it's just an interim check, and there's no release associated with it. So you want to be careful. If you receive money, you don't want to sign a release unless you are satisfied that's all the money you need to resolve your claim.
Should we feel any time pressure during these times right now where if we don't reach out to our agent fast enough, the window will close? Because I know some folks are saying, I'm going to lay low till the harder hit folks get taken care of, and then I'll visit my issues down the road. Should you be careful waiting too long?
So two things I would not wait on. One, if you are going to make a claim, I would notify your insurance broker, your insurance representative, and open a claim. I would not wait on that if you're going to do it, because there may be time limits. It could be 60 days or 90 days in the policy, and ultimately you're going to have to file a proof of loss. And so you want to be in touch with the insurance company relatively quickly in order to not let that lapse. The other thing you don't want to sit on is waiting to tarp your roof or resolve something that can cause further damage. And that's your obligation under the insurance policy, is to mitigate your damage. So don't wait there.
Tell me if you don't know the answer to this. I don't want to spring it on you, but people are asking about FEMA and where their coverage stops and homeowners insurance starts. Can you give us any advice along those lines where we might be tempted to step back and go, I'm not going to file a claim. FEMA's going to fix everything.
My understanding is that FEMA does not apply where you have insurance.
Right.
But FEMA may apply where there are difficulties with the insurance. And FEMA is likely also not going to completely resolve your problem. So if you have insurance, it's on you to file the insurance and not depend on FEMA.
What are our rights when it comes to picking our own people to fix our house? I know that contractors are probably going to be stretched thin around Augusta and surrounding areas for the next few years, fixing everything from this disaster. From an insurance standpoint, do we have the right to pick our people?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest mistakes I see homeowners or businessmen make is that they believe the insurance company is going to just handle the problem. It's really up to the insured to resolve the problem. Now, there may be companies who have arrangements already in place with the insurance company to do mitigation work or that sort of thing. So it may be totally reasonable to rely on the contractor that the insurance company suggests. But you definitely do not have to do that. And in most situations, the insurance company is not going to supply a contractor to make the repairs.
Let me ask you a couple of more questions. One has to do with home ownership versus renters. A lot of renters are well insured, as they should be. Do the rights or the privileges differ between a homeowner and a renter?
In most situations that I see, the homeowner, the landlord, would have insurance on the physical house, the property, and the renter's insurance would pertain to their personal property inside the home. So certainly their rights differ. And a rental homeowner's policy may have differences than a residential homeowner's policy, and so you shouldn't just necessarily assume they're the same thing.
Probably my last question, and it's just to offer some hope or optimism to the viewers. If they're in a situation right now where they're thinking, okay, this is going to break me. I'm going to spend all my money to fix my home that I love, and I don't have any money left to rent or to go to a hotel long term or something like that to tide me over while my home's being repaired. Can insurance step in then and help you with those expenses?
Yes, and you're again going to want to look at the terms of your policy to see if there are limits on that types of coverage.
Yeah.
However, especially if you have a valuable home, it's likely that you have coverage that will pay you, and they're likely to give you money relatively quickly to handle those types of expenses. So I think that's a careful look at your policy and quick communication with your adjuster about that. And if you don't feel like you have a satisfactory response, then you may want to get some professional help.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And having you or someone hold our hand through the process would be valuable, I think. My last question, and it has to do with hitting the reset button, and we're all kind of just figuring out what to do next time, God forbid, to navigate our way through this. Anything we should do when things settle back down to prepare ourselves for future disasters?
So me personally, after this, of course, I'm looking at those issues, and one of the first things I'm looking at is the trees around my house.
Yeah, like we don't like trees anymore,
Of course, in Augusta, we love trees, but if they're in the range of your house, it's definitely a concern, and if they're not perfectly healthy, it's a concern. But I'm also looking at my insurance policy to make sure I'm comfortable with the amount of coverage, the sublimits, the types of coverage. So it certainly is just a moment to take a look at what you've been doing and pay attention the next time to make sure you think you're doing it right.
Yes, and if our friend arborist Roy Simpkins is watching, and I hope he is, I didn't mean we don't like trees, period. I meant what Chris said. We don't like unhealthy trees. Chris, a wealth of information in a really short time, and I know it's going to help folks because we're confused right now and we don't know which path to pursue to get out of this, and you've helped us, and I appreciate it.
All right, thanks for having me, Brad.
Absolutely. Chris Cosper, attorney with Hull Barrett here in town. Hit him up if you need some advice to get through all of this. When we come back, the brand new president of the Augusta Metro Chamber, how she is working to help our businesses be their very best on the Means Report.